Keep you on the straight.
Again, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome.
I'm curious, just to start out, like, what is the appeal for you in doing like spy stuff? Like, you've gotten to do like a lot of different like spy related things, most notably, the Pigeon Tunnel lately, but like over the course of your career, it seems to be like a thread.
I think like one of the first TV series that I ever did was a thing called Spooks in the UK. And it was like really good training ground as well because you had to write really bloody quickly. So like it got me from being a classical composer to suddenly learning how the hell the TV and film business works. Like, oh yeah, okay, need to write super fast. But I think what's always been nice about writing for spy stuff and espionage and that kind of stuff is you can be quite cheeky in your writing. You got lots of chases, not the Pigeon Tunnel per se, but you have lots of chases that go on. But similarly, you can be quite tongue in cheek sometimes, even when it's a serious thing. You can always hark back to different sounds. I think the Pigeon Tunnel as an example, using the symbolom. It was kind of like great. You can do the Ipcress Files vibe. You go Barry vibe. You got that. But if you use it in a certain way, it becomes quite cheesy. But if you actually use it, I've never used one with a full orchestra before, and I'm saying to the guy like, "How does this work? I've got a hammered dulcimer and I can't bloody play the thing. So teach me about the symbolom." But I think spy things in general, it's just fun, isn't it? I mean, for me, whatever I'm scoring to in the film world and the TV world, if I've got something to react to, it makes the music so much better because suddenly it's like, I just want to watch this. And if you just want to watch it, suddenly you're really caught up in it in the first place.
Well, and I mean, this is also like the Pigeon Tunnel is also your second collaboration with Philip Glass, and I mean, like that's very much a big deal.
To him or me?
I mean, both of you. I mean, but
No,
I imagine coming from the world of classical music and then getting to work with Philip Glass is just like getting to like kind of come back to your roots.
yeah, and I think one of the things is, and obviously it's a massive honor, but I think the first time I collaborated with Philip was on Tales from the Loop, and I remember being petrified. And you need to bear in mind, I work with shitloads of bands, right? It's not a case of being starstruck by people, but there was, suddenly I'm flying over to New York and seeing Philip at his house and everything, and he's like, you're Philip, oh my goodness. And then after a while, you realize he's just the nicest human being in the world. And I think within 10 minutes, he had complimented me and also put me in my place, and neither of which he intended. He was just, he was talking about, he said, "Oh, your melodies are absolutely beautiful." He's been YouTubing me genuinely because he was referring to some of the tracks specifically. So I was like, oh great, suddenly my ego is growing a bit. And then he said, oh yeah, but why did you do this with your harmonies? What do you mean? And we went to a studio and he's playing it on the piano. He said, "This is what you did with the melody." Yeah, I was like, dum dum dum. I was like, yeah. So he said, "But you did this. Why didn't you do this?" And he suddenly takes my melody in a completely different direction. I'm like, because I'm not Philip Glass. and I think, and I say that as obviously a story, but also it ties in beautifully with the way that our work started going, because then it was a case of I'd be flinging him over some melodies and he'd be putting his chords underneath it, and he'd be flinging me over his melodies and I'd be putting my chords underneath it, and suddenly you just become as one. It's this symbiosis where you just kind of go along, and it suddenly just becomes this thing. It's not a case of Philip wrote that and Paul wrote this. It's not a case of this is Paul's style and this is Philip's style. You suddenly just you're taking people in a different direction. In film world, that's what you look for with a director, is someone to take you in a different direction that you wouldn't necessarily go, because that's where the best collaborations happen. This was the first time collaborating with Philip on Tales on the Loop that I'd ever had that with a composer. So then we did a thing called the Greenbelt. So it's actually my third collaboration with him. But then doing the Pigeon Tunnel, I was like, oh God, this is great. And the irony of it is that you've got in the Pigeon Tunnel, you've got Errol and David, John le Carre, kind of not battling it out, because it was actually this lovely conversation between them. There's no confrontation there per se. It's just this wonderful storytelling. And that's kind of how we did it with our music. Suddenly just like these two friends kind of just really bouncing ideas off each other and seeing where it goes.
Like Errol Morris is just like one of those people that I am constantly in awe of in his ability to tell stories. Like, what are the challenges, or are there challenges when you're working with someone who like has such like a visual style that it's very Errol Morris, but it changes from film to like it changes from project to project. Like it's it's Errol Morris, but like Dharma doesn't look anything like The Thin Blue Line, doesn't look like anything else.
His brain is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, do you have a favorite of his?
I can never remember the title of it, but it's the book he wrote about the servicemen accused of murder.
Oh, Wormwood.
Yes.
Right. So that was the first one that I did with Errol. And again, visually, it was wonderful because they're not reconstructions, they're vignettes. But there's acting, there's the story, there's the interviews. And I was doing a BAFTA Q&A over in New York the other week with him, just during the film festival. And I was on stage with him, and obviously you get to know him through the years. But I turned around and said to him, and I thought this was blatantly obvious. And he said, "Well, how do you get inspired when you're scoring my films?" Because I think I've done 5 or 6 with him now. And I said, what I love about working with you is, other than the fact you're a wonderful collaborator, I never know what the frig I'm going to get. I just get sent this movie, right? And suddenly you open it up, and it's like, oh, wow. Because no documentary, no film, nothing that he's done is, as you say, ever the same. So I said, I genuinely don't know what I'm going to get. Are there going to be vignettes? Is there confrontation? Is it a wonderful thing? And it seems to me, and he said, well, what do you mean? And he was actually being genuine for the first time in a very long time. He was like, well, what do you mean you don't know what you're going to get? I said, none of your movies are the same, which is a wonderful thing because it's taking people on a journey. And I think he was a bit shocked by that. And I said, no, this is a good thing. I said, you just get bored in the same way that I get bored doing the same kind of music or working on the same kind of projects. You seem to get bored as soon as you've established a style. Everyone else goes and copies it, and you just move on and start doing your new thing. And I think that's the thing when you're writing music for Errol's films, is it's like writing a score to a movie. There's wall-to-wall music in so much of his stuff, but it's very minimal, a lot of it, to give space for dialogue and so on. But it really carries the energy of his film. I always say that all the narrative in it and the people that are speaking and the interviewees and his voice, when you hear it on loop for 2 or 3 months, that becomes like the driving rhythm. So although that it's not a song, and although there's not a vocalist on it, they almost become the vocalist to the soundtrack. It's got this rhythm underneath it.
That's a really interesting approach to, like, I've talked to like various other composers who have done like quite a lot of documentary work, and like that's a different approach than one that I've heard, but it makes so much sense when I hear you explain it like that.
Think of it, it's like an instrument, isn't it? You have a lead instrument in your head, the way that we tend to kind of write, sitting at my piano or sitting at my computers or whatever, and then you do a mock-up. And so you've got a fake violin or a fake cello or fake electric guitar, whatever it is that you're doing. Actually, a real electric guitar played in very badly by me. But when you're kind of going along, that voice, the vocals, is already there. That's not getting replaced. And suddenly the sound of that becomes it's the lead instrument of your soundtrack. So whatever you're writing underneath it has got to match it. And then actually, I'm working on another Errol film at the moment, but it's a very different vibe. So suddenly, like, the voices in that are completely different. So suddenly the big orchestral stuff doesn't work underneath it because it drowns it out. So yeah, for me, the voice becomes a lead instrument, I guess.
After like starting out, like you've sort of moved into like this documentary milieu, like, as you've gone along. But I mean, like, early, like, as you did the score for Dredd, which is like very well regarded, and like is a movie that like keeps getting reappraised every couple of years, where it's like, no, it's good,
it's still really good.
You just didn't want to go see it because you kept thinking it was the Stallone thing.
I'm not getting drawn into film politics, but I agree.
But like, what are the things about doing like sort of like documentary or work versus sort of like more traditional, like just like narrative filmmaking?
Well, so I've just finished 3 features this year, right? Because I actually talked to my wife about it. I was like, God, I've done 3 features, a theatre, 2 games, 2 TV series and 3 docs. It's been a fucking bonkers year, but I'm loving it. And creatively, I'm on this roll. I'm loving the stuff that I'm writing, and it's all very different. But I think the difference with feature films, and again, it depends whose documentary it is, because I don't do that many docs with different people. Errol's just, he's Errol, you know. If Errol asks you to do something, you do it. But I think that when you write stuff for feature films, a lot of the time you're helping the emotion, I guess. Yeah, and yes, it's scored to picture, and you're trying to do something that's not formulaic, or at least I am. You know, I don't want to write the same thing over and over again. I mean, you talk about Dredd. Dredd is one of the weirdest soundtracks I've ever written. There's no, other than Anderson's theme, I don't think there's any real emotion in that subject. Now, you've got Marmar's Requiem, which is all slowed down as she's going down this, but what a wonderful creative process to get into that, where you're taking a track and then slowing it down by 8,000% and then adding in instruments and trying in different things, because not every track works slowed down 8,000%. Piano sounds like a heap of shit. So you're trying to work out what instrument works slowed down like that. And that's how my brain has always been from a music producer point of view. So there's not that much emotion in it. I've just done a film with Neil Berger that I did Limitless with 10 years ago or whatever. So I've just done a film feature with him, and it was the same. There's not that much emotion in it, which makes it really bloody hard to score, because then it's like, well, what am I doing if I can't reach for what's the easy trick? You know, here's a piano, or here's a Rhodes, or here's a keyboard. It's always very easy to play a melody on. But if you're suddenly having to not use melody, what do you use to get people engrossed in it? Percussion? It's not really a percussion soundtrack. So suddenly you're challenging yourself and trying to use different instruments. So I'm going off on one. But for me, this is where the fun part is, because feature films, a lot of the time, are about pulling emotions. I find documentaries aren't about the emotions, because as soon as you try to make it too emotional, it's cheesy. You know, oh, I'm feeling sad for the poor person that's gone and done this. So you're helping the drama, but without using emotion. And I think, going back to Pigeon Tunnel, what's great about it, again, it's the momentum of Errol's films. Keeping something going without doing anything is why Philip's music is so wonderful. It's so minimal, but yet his chords change the whole time. It's changing the whole time. And I think to do 80 minutes of that, similarly, you're going to get bored of triplets going or on the piano. But if you then combine that with other stuff, you can make it feel filmy, which is really fun. But it suddenly becomes, well, it's certainly not a pop video, but it's actually all about the music. It's not all about the music, but it is about the music. Whereas films, a lot of the time, you're just trying to help the wallpaper. You've got sound effects coming in, you've got this, you got that. For documentaries, it's very much about music and dialogue together. And obviously, there are sound effects and there's sound design and so on. But fundamentally, it's about dialogue first and then the music. And in Errol's case, they really go hand in hand.
So you've got this out. You have Fellow Travelers. Like it's like, as you said, like you're having a very bonkers year.
It's fun.
Like I very rarely ask composers about video games, because I don't play them, because I have terrible hand-eye coordination and I have no idea what's going on. But it always seems like composers get to have a lot of fun with video games, like, because you're trying to like work with things like loops and random branching paths and things like that. Like, it just seems like it's a big opportunity to be creative, but also a lot more work than probably normal.
Whereas if you speak to, well, I say video game composers, as in people in my head who are, we're not worthy, they always go like, God, video games are so easy, but film's so hard. And I'm like, you don't understand. And I think it really depends where your mind is and how it is, because spoke to Grant Kirkhope the other day, and I was saying to him, he did like Donkey Kong rap, and I was saying like, God, you've been doing it for ages. And he said, yeah, but my brain is non-linear. So non-linear meaning you have all these different elements going on, and there's no start and there's no end. It just is. It's a very existential way of writing. And well, I mean, you talk about Fellow Travelers. So Fellow Travelers is obviously a TV series, but it's all about the music when it's there. So it's not like Errol stuff where it's wall to wall. Yeah, maybe in a 1 hour episode, there's maybe 20 minutes of music, but when it's there, it's 3-minute cues, which sometimes there's no dialogue. It's driving it through. It's quartet. We record it United Recording. It's just a really, really, God, what's the word? Not personal. Whereas the music feels very present, is very close to you. So it's very intense. So you've got that where it's running. Whereas video games, music is so important, but it's kind of coming up afterwards, in the sense that as they're making it all, you know, obviously it's about the game first of all, but the sound design is everywhere. So sound design is so important for games. And then the geniuses are the people that implement this bloody music, because it's one thing coming up with a loop and coming up with the stems, but to then implement it saying, right, now you're turning right. And a lot of people use this thing called wise. It's like, now you're turning right. Here's a trigger point, and goes right, ding. And suddenly the next layer comes up or it changes. Having a brain like Austin Wintory, you know, just like having a brain that can sort of work that out. It's almost like mapping it out, going, okay, well, I'm going to need that, then it's going to need to rise there, and it's going to need to rise there, and it's going to need to rise there. The way that my brain got on it, and I'm definitely not the most non-linear writer. I am definitely more linear, but I think that's because of my background with bands. So I'm used to kind of 3-4 minute songs that just are. And I did this music for a Disney ride called Test Track at the Epcot Center. And I remember when they were explaining how it all worked, it's like, well, there are going to be 10 different rooms where people are walking through. So they said, right, as people walk through, they're going to be hearing music from the other rooms. So we can't have 10 different pieces of music. This is when you're lining up to go on the, you know, for 2 hours to go on the ride. So they said, you know, it's got to be somehow connected to each other. It's got to, really going to have to be the same key, because otherwise there's going to be this cacophony. And sometimes you'll be hidden behind a wall. So then you can kind of ride the emotion in this bit a bit more. But basically, if you think about it, it's like 8 different tracks all working together. So it's like 8 different stems. And sometimes I was like, well, I can just get rid of the drums there and we can just have a pizzicato string thing. And then we can fade up the cello and guitar for this bit when they come into that bit. That's what games are. But it was just ironic that I'd never done that before. So it got me into that with the whole loop thing, because obviously it's on all day from the moment that the poor person goes into the park, switches it on, and he's got to hear this Test Track music until midnight. It's like, never, I can't hear this again. But then I was working on this game called Battlefield Hardline, and that was the first game I'd ever done. And Paul Gorman up at EA Games, he was brilliant, because he just took my hand and kind of said, well, look, you're really good at writing music. You just concentrate on the music. I'm going to guide you as far as when I'm going to need more bass, and I'll work out what's going in the layers, because you have 4 layers for that game. So it's kind of the tension layer, which is maybe a bit of pad, and then suddenly the baddie comes around the corner. Dum, 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 dum. Right, so they start fading up that layer, and then the next layer, right now it's full on. So it's almost like mixing a band, but in real time. So I mean, again, it's just the way that all these things kind of, they do tie in together, and they get your brain going elsewhere. And that's what I like. It's when someone's challenging my brain to do something that it's not used to. Otherwise, all your stuff's just standing the same, isn't it?
That's absolutely wonderful. Paul, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me. This has been so delightful and informative and fun. And thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Have a good rest of your day, sir.
And you. Thanks, man.